It's time for The Scribble, your weekly fix of celebrity chats, bizarre stories in the news, and basic random chatter with best-selling author and syndicated radio host Jeremy Bradley. Make sure your seat is in the upright and locked position and your barf bag is securely in place. Here's Jeremy Bradley.
Thank you very much, Larson. Jeremy Bradley here. This is The Scribble. Thank you so much for tuning in on your favorite podcast app to your least favorite show. We appreciate your time. All right, so we're going to talk about something that's unavoidable. It's inevitable. It's happening. It's happening right now as you listen to this. It's happened, believe it or not, since this show started 1 minute ago. Can you believe it? You know what I'm talking about? This is an easy one, right? We're not doing any hard-hitting questions here. We're talking about aging. You've aged since this show started. That is a fact, right? You're not as young as you were when this show started, now that we're heading into the 2-minute mark of it. You're not. You're not as young as you were when this show started. So we're not talking, though, about our own aging on the show today. We're talking about the aging population, right? That's our parents. They're getting older. And there's this sudden role reversal where the kids are now expected to take care of the parents. Maybe you're going through this, maybe you know somebody who's going through it, and potentially you're about to go through it in the coming years. That's what we're talking about on The Scribble right after this.
Isn't it crazy that you wait for payday, but before you know it, you're strapped for cash again? It's time to stop blowing your money and become a smart spender with the book, The Official Guide to Being an American Cheapskate at cheapskatebook.com. Learn simple ways to cut costs at home every day and during special times of the year. Don't go broke at Christmas. Don't remortgage the house for a fancy vacation. The book is filled with tips to save you money throughout the year. Check out the best-selling book, The Official Guide to Being an American Cheapskate at cheapskatebook.com or on Amazon and iTunes.
Ever had something to get off your chest but never had the balls to say it? That's a load of crap. Speak Free with JB.com is exactly what you've been waiting for. Your chance to tell it like it is and not care what anybody else thinks. Have your say on issues of the day. Join newspaper and radio columnist Jeremy Bradley as he tells it like it is. Hundreds of thousands of people have stopped by, including some well-known celebrities who have had a chat with JB and speak candidly about what's really going on in the world. You can join them too. Have a rant or a rave. Be brave and head on over to www.speakfreewithjb.com now.
JB here, back on The Scribble. So there's two people in my life who are going through pretty much the same situation. They don't know each other, which is, I almost want to kind of connect them and say, you know, you guys can swap stories. One is my cousin and one is my husband's assistant, and they know that I'm talking about this on the show today, so it's not like I'm, you know, complaining or talking behind their backs. So both of them are going through situations where their parents are in various stages of unhealth. They're unwell, medical, whatever, you know what I'm saying. So my uncle has dementia and was in a hospital. He couldn't stay in his apartment anymore, deemed by the doctor. So the only place that they could put him until a room opened up in a nursing home was a hospital. So he was kind of essentially a hospital patient for months. Even though he wasn't, you know, the traditional sense of a hospital, which is somebody who's needing, you know, urgent medical care right now. You know, it's not like he was undergoing tests or anything like that. It was just kind of a place to stick him, which that in and of itself sounds not inhumane, but, you know, not as compassionate, you know, for somebody of his age and who's going through dementia. And then the other is my husband's assistant who, it's actually her in-laws. It's not her actual parents. But the mother-in-law is going through cancer treatments. And so it's up to my husband's assistant and her husband, which it's his parents. Essentially, it's been put on them to go back and forth, you know, take transport to and from, you know, chemo appointments. And the dad is also in poor health, not taking care of himself. I haven't seen the house that they live in, but she's described it to me as a hoarding situation where it's, you know, dangerous and the basement is just stockpiled with things. And so we kind of had, meaning me and these two individual people at different times, have kind of butted heads and kind of clashed. Now this is the tough situation because people come to you and share this information. right? You're a friend, you're a relative, whatever the situation is, and they open up to you, right? If you have a close relationship. But the problem, though, is that when they do something like that, it kind of does open you up to either pushing back or, suggesting something. And without saying it, they're kind of like, you know what, who are you to tell me that da-da-da-da? Almost like a mind your own business kind of a thing. But then you flip it around and kind of go, but you came to me complaining about this. I'm not saying this is what they're doing. I'm just saying people will then get defensive, right? Some people might just come to you because they want your reassurance that that they're doing the right thing, right? They want you to reinforce it and go, no, that's right. You got it. Well, here's the thing. I'm not that kind of person. I'm going to be realistic. I'm going to look at things a different way. So let's talk about my uncle's situation first. So we knew that he's, been unwell for quite some time. He's was in a 50 plus or not a retirement home, but it was like a 50 plus apartment kind of a thing, right? So basically it's just old people live in this building. That's what it was. It was a regular apartment. And so as time had gone on, he was showing signs of decline, not knowing where he is, seeing people that weren't there. And so he goes through tests, he sees his doctor and things like that. And then it got to the point where he was driving and didn't know where he was, which is obviously dangerous because if you don't know where you are, how can you follow the rules of the road, right? Like something's not computing in your brain. So it was later determined that he's got dementia. And at one point then, from what I was told, he that's not the right word. He could have burnt down his apartment because he'd gone and turned on the stove and then just didn't do anything with it. Like he wasn't cooking or whatever, he just went and turned it on. So not almost burned down. I want to walk that back. That's not what happened. But if he goes now put something on there, then a fire could have started. So that's dangerous. So when my cousin had that information, she went back to the doctor and said, look, we've got to, get him treatment or have somebody needs to take care of him or he's got to go to a home or something. And as we know about the healthcare system in some places that, you got to wait until a room opens up, right? Like it's not that simple as just... It's not like it's a hotel where there's all these rooms and suddenly he can just go and do that. So my cousin was going back and forth to the hospital almost every day. And she said that because he wasn't basically getting the attention that he was needing from staff, which again, you look at that and go, well, it was sort of a place just to keep him, right? So it's not like the nurses or whoever are constantly, check on it. He's just kind of there. He's sort of a tenant at some point, So that's where my cousin would go all the time. Now, she's got a brother, so my other cousin, and it's kind of, it was sort of between the two of them to kind of figure out, okay, well, you go this day, I'll go this day, I'll go this day. And, obviously that's a very emotional taxing thing because my cousin works all day and then she's got to go and, check on her dad in the evening. And it was just eating up a lot of time. So I have conversations with her all the time. And she was saying that, this is just, it's the healthcare system, it's this and this and that. And so, for the first little while, you sit there and you listen to it because, again, that's family. So that's just what you do. And then me being, the resourceful person that I am and the thinker and kind of, and again, when you take that step back, it's like when people come to you about relationship troubles, right? And they're complaining about their partner and you can sort of give that outside view, looking in and being an observer and say, well, it does kind of sound da-da-da-da. But again, whether the person wants to hear that or not, even though they might be asking you your opinion. And so in this situation, through the different conversations that I've had with my cousin, I said to her, but have you contacted your elected officials in terms of, at this level of government, this one's responsible for healthcare, or this one's responsible for this. I'm not saying complain and say, get my dad in a home now. That's not what I mean. But I'm saying it is their job, especially if they're because I'm talking about somebody in Canada, at the provincial level, the hospital system, the healthcare system, is under a provincial minister. It's called an MLA, Manitoba Legislative. I forgot like a cough or something today, sorry. So it's up to your provincial representative. I said, have you even called and just said, this is the situation. What can we do? What are the options? What are the resources? What help is available? Because if you haven't had to go through this before, my aunt died of cancer several years ago. So, but again, I mean, if you haven't had to go through a parent having dementia, I mean, yes, you don't know what is happening. You don't know where to go. You don't know what to turn to. But like I'm saying, so I would go to my elected official and say, look, I just need resources. I need help. Like, what can we do? What can be done? Who can help? Is there home care that can come and do this? Like, I need some sort of intervention, because if you just don't know what's available, go to the people who make those laws and those, set up the systems. And if your representative doesn't know, get me the answer. Because with all due respect, sir or ma'am, that is your fucking job. I realize that politicians, first of all, are go into hiding because the mob mentality these days of people, cursing them out. But at the same time, that is your fucking job. So I'm not saying that you can pick up the phone and they're going to have an answer for you right now. But let's go back to your customer service training from retail back in the day. What would be your response? That's a good question. Let me find out for you. That was how I was always trained in a retail environment. You know what? I'm not sure, but let me go and ask. You know what? Let me go and get that answer. Can I get back to you? Let me just go and find out and I'll get back to you. That's what you would do. So as an elected official, even more so, you're on the public dime. I'm paying your salary. I'm paying your pension. I'm paying your fucking health care. Yeah, you get me an answer. Lay it out there. So when I mentioned that to my cousin, she brushes off the idea. No. Well, then... do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's one thing that you can just stew, you can just bitch and stew in your juices and, just set off. But then you have somebody who's going and saying, well, have you tried this? Like, what about reaching out and seeing what they can do? Or actually what I did get was, well, what's she going to do? What's he going to do? Well, you don't know. You haven't asked him. So that's a starting point. Why? You almost seem like it's going to be bothering your elected official, again, whose job it is to get you these answers. If it relates to healthcare and the provincial healthcare system, yeah, your elected official is connected to that. Again, not expecting that person to move mountains and get your dad into a home tomorrow. Not saying that at all, and I never have said that. But that's the starting point. Pick up the phone, make that call. Are there different organizations? Are there nonprofits? Are there, can somebody come and check on him? Can we get kind of like a buddy system? Are there organizations that do that? Is there provincial funding to have that? Or what? Unless you ask, you have no idea. Has she gone on to government websites and looked up information and sought questions or answers to her questions? No. She asks the nurse at the hospital, but the nurse what's the nurse going to go and say? That's not my job. I don't know. I don't work for I'm not, you didn't vote for me. I'm just an employee here. I don't, right? Oh, I just work here is what the response would be. But again, what do they have to do with it? Nothing. The nurse, but I mean, I guess but that's the thing. You could also go and ask. I mean, if they're in the healthcare system, maybe the nurse would know. I'm not saying the nurse can pull some strings and make something happen, but what I'm saying is, are you asking those types of questions? Are you going and saying, like, so what would happen? Like, what happens then? How long of a wait is this? Who says when there's a spot that's open? Like, what's the phone number for that place? Is there a top doctor somewhere? Is it just, how do you know? Because the options after the hospital were it could be one of 6 nursing homes. And so I asked her, I'm like, so what is it? Just it goes in rotation, or there's just happens to be a bed that opens up in the 3rd place, so then the next person on the waiting list? How many people are on this list? If the condition of the person is deteriorating, I mean, can they get bumped up? Could it, what are all these questions that my cousin just didn't have answers for? Now, maybe it's different because I'm a journalist, and so I come with a million questions for any sort of situation. But if you haven't done the research and you haven't looked it up and you haven't even, and I'm telling you, that's the way to go. Go right to the source. Bitching to me does nothing. I mean, if I really wanted to, I would have reached out to her elected official on my own and just said, look, call this person who lives in your neighborhood. She's going through this situation. Reach out to her. Call her. Listen to her story. But if the story's not told, if it's not relayed to anybody who can actually make a difference or get the ball rolling on something, well, then you'll sit and bitch, all day, every day. So now my uncle is in a home, which is great. It's in the same place that my grandma was before she died of dementia. So he's being taken care of there. There's trained staff that are, it's not a hospital, so it is a place that he's going to live, potentially until the end. And she's at ease now. There's a little bit more to it. But again, for that 3 or 4 months that you have, your dad in a hospital, and that was something that she was saying to me, is that it's such a bitch, when you have to step up and take care of your parents. So, I realize that's just sort of a societal thing now, right? Is that all of a sudden the roles reverse and now you take care of your elderly parents. Although the craziest part is that you're not really legally required to, in a sense. If something happens to my parents and I don't have a great relationship with them, it's not my fucking problem if they're, going through something, right? If you're estranged from your family or you're, but I get it. You don't want to see your parents suffering. I mean, I get it. I'm not saying that my cousin shouldn't care. I'm not saying that she should just go and say, well, NMP, not my problem. No. But to have that burden on you is not fair when there's how many people on the taxpayer dime that burden is their problem. That's their sole responsibility, is to do it. It's not a burden for them. If it's their job or if it's what they've been elected to manage or handle, then call the health minister. Call the health minister's office. I realize you're going to get a gatekeeper, so it's not going to be like, oh, hold on, I'll put you right through. No, I know that's, trust me. Again, being a journalist for 25 years, I know that it's not that easy just to get the person right on the phone. But you explain it. I'm not saying coming out swinging and ripping apart the healthcare system and trashing, and calling names and whatever. No, that's not going to get you anywhere. But again, you reach out to the health minister and say, look, this is the situation. I realize there's processes in place, but I want to fully understand. I want to know what's happening. I want to know what can be done. And then I said to my cousin, and here's the thing. If the health minister doesn't get back to you as the citizen, then go to the media. And I could say that as a journalist. Go to the media. Reach out to your local news and document when you've called. Record the phone calls as well. I always suggest that. Always suggest that. Always record the call. Keep things in writing to, keep your log, keep your history, keep documentation. And by the way, let me just go on a little bit more on that, is at some point during the call, so if you're going to record the call, throw in the date so that you can timestamp it. Or as the phone is ringing, okay, it's June 13th at 10:30 a.m. So you have that. But I would say work it into the conversation. So if they say, oh, I'll get back to you. All right, so I'm just looking, it's June 13th here. So when do you think I'll expect to hear back from you? Have it verbally said on the call. Have it verbally said. I've done this, by the way, where I've been a real dick to somebody a company that I've gone back and forth with that's providing shitty customer service. I got bounced up to the executive level. That's how high this had gone up because of problem after problem after problem. When I call the guy, hey, John, how are you on this June 13th at 9:30 a.m. Pacific? I'll absolutely do that. Because you don't have him going and saying, oh, it's not June 13th. It's not whatever. Oh, okay, good, right? He didn't disagree, and he knows that I'm recording the call, because why would you say something like that? I've very clearly told him that our calls are recorded. So so for your documentation, absolutely get things in writing and record the phone calls. So, okay, so you've got the gatekeeper of the health minister. All right, so let's say the health minister's name is Sharon. Just throw that up. Okay, so when will I hear from the minister? If it's June 13th now, when will I hear from her? Will I hear from her today? It's June 13th. What about, will it be sometime in the next 24 hours, 48 hours? And if I don't hear from them by the end of the week, I'm going to call again, and I'm going to find out, the person's name with whom I spoke. Oh, I'm sorry. I spoke with Debbie on Tuesday at 9:30. I just went and listened back to the call. Right? Put it there that you've recorded it. You've got it. Because again, like I said, I'm not saying go nasty right from the beginning, because that's just going to get you in a tailspin. I'm saying record it so that you've got it on the record that you've reached out on, in June, and now we're coming to July and it's still not resolved. So that's where, if push comes to shove, that's where I'm saying, you start out that way. Innocent phone call. Hey, look, I just need some information. What can you tell me? What's, point me in the right direction. Again, their job. That's their job. But at least you've got your paper trail or digital trail. You've got your log. You've got your history of this. And again, if your elected officials aren't getting back to you, now you know that if it comes to the healthcare system and the elderly people, you go to the news, because the news is going to go and say, Why are you failing this senior who is in ill health with dementia, who needs assistance, and you're not getting back to people? You don't think that's going to prompt a response from the health minister almost immediately? It sure as fucking hell is. Sure is. Sure is. Now again, it shouldn't have to get to that point. But we know in the grand scheme of things, it likely will for some situations in some departments. So, do that. Okay. So, we're going to take a break. I'm going to come back, and when we come back, I'm going to talk about my colleague who she's having to step in for her in-laws, her mother and father-in-law. And we had not a heated discussion. It was sort of animated. We'll talk about that on the Scribble right after this.
Who are the Kardashians feuding with now? What did that little thug Justin Bieber do this time? Who's getting hitched? And who's headed for Splitsville? Hear the latest celebrity news and gossip every day on Entertainment Wrap-Up. The good, the bad, the ugly, but mostly the ridiculously hilarious. It's all recapped in this daily segment at entertainmentwrapup.com. Have a laugh at the expense of the rich and famous when they take themselves way too seriously. It's 3 minutes of time-wasting fun at entertainmentwrapup.com. Check out Entertainment Wrap-Up at entertainmentwrapup.com. Brought to you by Speak Free Books.
It's never too early to start thinking about your next holiday. Have you checked out Mexico recently? From tequila tasting, swimming with horses, to ziplining through the jungle and watching whales and dolphins in their natural habitat, Puerto Vallarta has it all. Visit mexico.jbonair.com to see all the fun PV has to offer. That's at mexico.jbonair.com for hundreds of photos, interviews, and videos from around the tourist hotspot. Check out mexico.jbonair.com for all the fun. That's mexico.jbonair.com.
JB here, back on the Scribble. It's something that we're all going to have to deal with at some point if we still have living parents who are declining in health and well-being and, everything. Obviously, it's something that you don't want to look forward to. You don't look forward to, you don't want to deal with. But that's the reality. And so when I've heard the stories from people who are having to take it, my parents are still together. They're still, they both had gone through cancer stuff, but they were able to take care of each other, and they still are. So I'm not in that situation. But for my colleague who I mentioned earlier, it's her in-laws that are kind of going through this. The mom is going through cancer treatment. The dad is just in poor health. He's a hoarder. Apparently there's a whole bunch of shit all over their house. And so my colleague was having a conversation with me as she was going to pick up the mom from chemo. Now, a few things on this is that I realized that it's not your actual parent. So that's kind of something, but it's your husband, and your husband's affected and he's at work. I'm like, but then why are you having to leave work early to go and pick up somebody else's parent, right? And so, and like I said, by the way, these are my thoughts, but you're coming to me and complaining about this kind of a thing, right? That I've always got to go and pick her up from chemotherapy. But you've taken on that responsibility when you don't have to. So it's one thing to offer or step in and do something out of the goodness of your heart. Great. But you can't really go and bitch to people then when you're doing it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of, you put yourself in this position. I'm not saying that you're going to stand up to your husband and say, no, that's not my fucking mom, so go, yeah. But, like, why isn't the husband taking the time off? Or why? And so the response is, well, you can't just say no to the parents. And it is heartless as it is to reply and say, you kind of can, though. Now, here's the thing. So, because the person is already doing this, they've already stepped into the role. They're already assuming the role of caregiver. They're kind of, the balls. It is one of those situations where if you criticize or if you say, well, you don't really have to or whatever, they're going to get combative and you're going to have this issue. And so something that I'd said to her when we had our conversation the other day was, there are ways though that whether it's a taxi to the chemo appointment or it's getting a ride from somebody, the husband's in poor health and can't drive her. Again, this would be where I would say something like to my cousin, is there like a seniors shuttle? Is there like a patient shuttle van? Is there an organization that does this and helps people get to their appointments? Have you even looked into that? You know, she's in her 40s. My colleague's in her 40s, so she's resourceful. She knows how to use the internet. She knows how to use a phone, probably better than I do. So, you know, like, have you looked into things like that? I realize that it's not like you're going with her to the appointments and you're sitting there and holding her hand and walking her through it and you know, comforting her. You're literally just being an Uber driver, essentially. So again, it's a nice thing to do, but, you know. So then she was talking about her father-in-law who, so again, this is in Canada, so there was a snowstorm not too long ago, and he had apparently fallen and, you know, almost froze to death because he was just, you know, he'd fallen, he was out there and, you know, couldn't get a hold of anybody, you know, didn't have a phone or whatever. And I said, but again, I realize that accidents happen and something, you know, whatever, but if you know that you can't walk very well or that it's dangerous conditions outside, it's kind of on you, you know. And she said that the dad doesn't take care of himself just physically, eats garbage, you know, smokes, is unhealthy, doesn't move, doesn't exercise, whatever. And so I kind of, after a while, after this session, I said, but you also have to kind of, whether you say it to the person or not, kind of going, well, you know, there's the old saying, you made your bed, now lie in it. You know, that's my brothers and I said that when we were growing up, both of my parents smoked like crazy. And so I remember my brother, when my brothers when they got married and they first started having kids, I remember my brother offering to get my dad like the patch, you know, for Christmas to stop smoking, whatever. And my dad's immediate response was, first of all, rage. I remember we were all standing in the kitchen and my dad just lost his shit. But my dad's argument was, don't tell me how to spend my money. So you look at it and go, okay, wait a second. My brother's approach is, don't you want to be around for your grandkids? You know, what you want to be healthy for the grandkids. You want to be able to do this with your grandkids. And my dad's immediate defense was about money. Don't tell me how to spend my money. You kids are ungrateful. I paid for your hockey growing up. And all of us are kind of standing there going, he didn't say anything about money. Where did that, like, what are you hearing? How did that go so sideways? So fast forward probably a day or two anyway. We're not in that scenario anymore. We're not in their kitchen. We're not in their house. We're not with them. Having a conversation with my brother. He was so mad that he said, you know what? If dad gets lung cancer, fuck him. Fuck him. I'm not driving him to an appointment. I'm not paying for medication. I'm not doing anything. Fuck him, was what my brother said. He was fired up. Fired up, because that would be a situation where, you know what, we've told you, and even when I was growing up, I had a towel at my bedroom door because I didn't like the cigarette smoke coming into my room. I didn't like my thing. So you have your kids basically begging you to stop smoking, stop poisoning our lungs. We want to be healthy. And, so when my brother had the conversation or the confrontation with my dad, like I said, we were already grown up. My nephews are 18, 19 years old. So this is a while back. So none of us live there anymore. But, again, that's, when you're out of the situation, then my brother was just like, yeah, no, we're not, I'm not doing anything surrounding if he gets lung cancer. He didn't have lung cancer, but, if that comes up, forget it. Fuck him. That's, you're looking out for your parent and saying, hey, I want you to be healthy. Hey, I want you to be around for your grandkids. And to get so defensive. And so apparently this is how my colleague's father-in-law is exactly the same way. And by the way, I found out that he's Ukrainian. I was like, oh, maybe that's kind of the same sort of hot-headed mentality as my dad, who's a Ukrainian. But she said, the house is a mess, and they've tried to gently say, like, how about we kind of get things cleaned up or whatever. He's like, it's my fucking house. I'll do what I want. So then I said, well, then what happens if you just brush your hands of it and say, then you know what? It's up to you, big guy. Don't call us when you need help fixing something in the house. We're not coming into that disaster. If you watch the show Hoarders, you know that people go through that all the time. Eventually they threaten to cut off and say, well, then you're not going to see the grandkids. We're not bringing your grandkids there. My colleague and her husband don't have kids, so that wouldn't apply for them. But I said to her, like, what happens if you just went and said for 1 week, you know what? Sorry, we just can't. We've got our things going. Like we can't get there this week. We can't drive you. We can't. And so she's like, well, it's not my mother-in-law's fault that she's got cancer and has to go for the treatments, and you hate seeing her suffer or whatever. And I said, but again, at the end of the day, that is up to them to figure out how to get around. It's really up to them. And so, like, one of the things that I've said a lot of things, but I guess kind of one of the biggies that I've said is this generation, her in-laws are basically the same age as my parents, which is they're in their 70s. Back in the day, you had to be resourceful to get through life. I think about this too. When something would break or whatever at our house, my dad would head out to the garage. He would figure out a way to fix it, or he would, come up with something. He would, you think about anybody who back in the day who lived on a farm. Your tractor breaks or a tool breaks or something. You figured out a way to fix it. You figured out a way. There was no internet to just go and Google it and figure it out. And so it's interesting, though, that we have that generation that was of the mindset. I'm trying to think of the times when we would go camping. My grandpa would be rooting through the garbage bins, and he would get a lawn chair that was broken, and he would fix it up and make it essentially brand new. That's what that generation did. So it's fascinating to me. Yes, they might not be up on technology and how to use their phones and things like that, but they can look up things. They can look up, they call information or call an operator or call City Hall and start asking and start that conversation as to, how do I, let's say it is a hoarding situation. I'll call the province and say, like, what do I do? Like, who do I'm in my 70s. I don't really know. I think my hoarding, got out of control. Who do I call? What do I do? What are the options? I'm not saying that they're going to start Googling and booking appointments online or whatever, but if they have a phone, a landline even, I'm not saying the top of the line iPhone, but if they have a landline, or if they even have, neighbors that they've lived beside for 30 years, ask somebody for help. But this expectation that, the kids, the in-laws or whoever now have to sort of come in and take care just because the adult goes and says, I don't know, I'm not going to do it. Well, then, you know what? Then live in your fucking hoard, and there you go. And again, it's harsh to say that, but think about when you were growing up. Right? Maybe you were being stubborn, you were a picky eater. And back then, I remember this, then go hungry is what you would be told by your parent. Right? That's what's for dinner. So if you don't eat it, then you're going to go to bed hungry, you're going to starve, and there you go. My brother was a very picky eater, and you know what? Eventually, he would eat. Eventually, he would eat what was in front of him. And so, maybe you call that tough love, as a kid when you're growing up. But at the same time, you go and say, look, you're not some like feeble old man. You still have your wits about you. You can fight. You know how to fight us. You know how to argue. You know how to stand your ground and assume your position. Then, okay, tough guy, then it's on you. Figure it out. NMP or NMF, not my fucking problem. Not my fucking problem. So, when do you draw that line? How do you draw that line? I would say, it was a different situation for somebody like, let's say my grandma who, in her 90s has dementia, is in a home, doesn't know where she is. Okay, I get it. Different situation. I'm not even saying that they're the same situation. But in the instance of, let's say my parents, it's not morbid to think about death. It's not. If they, again, my grandparents are dead, so my parents have been involved in planning funerals, but let's say that they haven't been. Let's say that my grandparents are still alive. And my parents are going to go and say, well, I don't know, I've never planned a funeral. Well, then you've got to figure it out. Maybe it's not Google, but maybe it's calling the funeral home. Maybe it's calling even the church. My grandparents went to church for, up until the end. Call the church. Ask somebody. Ask a coworker who's had parents die. I don't accept this whole, I'm old and, now the kids are going to take care of me. Maybe that is the unsaid expectation. I don't subscribe to that. That's not, but, my parents are married 50 some years. Well, 51 now, I guess. And you look at that and go, okay, so my partner dies. Now what? What do I do? What's the next step? Well, how, what changes in my life? How does my finance change? How does they own their house now at this point, so that would be moot. But, how does the house insurance, If that's under, is it under both of their names? Is it under one name? Like what happens? They're retired. My parents have plenty of time to be thinking about these things and making arrangements and doing whatever. So for my colleagues' in-laws, who again are both retired, if you're not going to do that for your own life, if you're not going to, and I realize that hoarding is a sickness and all these, it's a clinical, it's a thing. It's not just he's a pack rat and he literally has a hoard from what she describes. If you it's not up to you to get them fixed. It's not up to you to, tell it, because at the end of the day, now, somebody like my grandma who was opening the door for strangers and things like that, fine. That's unsafe. Okay, she can't make decisions on her own. Now we got to step in. So, but in the situation of the colleague who's, basically now an Uber service for one of the parents, and then, a nag who's just going to get ripped on by the dad who's combative about everything. I mean, and this is, by the way, again, as I've said, it's in-laws. These aren't actually her actual parents. Maybe that's a conversation that you have with your spouse then too. And go, first of all, that might be your dad, but listen to the way he is talking to me. I'm not saying give an ultimatum that it's like, it's your dad or me. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, and I know her husband, by the way, he is kind of a rough and tough, sort of a hillbilly brute, I'll punch you out kind of a guy. So you stand up to your dad then, tough guy. You stand up to him and go, you don't fucking talk to my wife like that. And here's the deal. You do, then you are on your own. Because like I said, go back to them. Say to the dad, you know what? We're going on vacation for a week. Sorry. Can't. It's on you, big guy. Whether that's you calling an Uber, taking a city bus, asking a neighbor for a ride, talking to some organization and finding out if there's a shuttle that can get you to an appointment. That's on you. That's all shit you can do. So that's like, it pissed me off back in the day when my mom would call me and ask me to look up something on Google. You're calling me from your fucking iPhone. Figure out how to work Google. Figure it out. She was a teacher for 30 goddamn years. Figure the fuck out. So again, it's tough conversations to have, but I don't buy into that whole suddenly now I'm a nursing assistant. Suddenly now I'm a caregiver. Suddenly it's still my life. And yes, my life will change when I have to go and visit you every other day or whatever in the nursing home. But I also look at it this way and say, I don't talk to you every day anyway. So why all of a sudden am I now, I can go weeks, months, years without talking to my parents. And vice versa, whether I reach out to them or they reach out to me. I haven't talked to one of my brothers in years. So, I kind of look at that and go, why would my life change now just because something has happened? One of our employees, I was gonna name them, but one of our employees, though, she had a falling out with her mom. My employee's sister had died, and the mom was... It's a long story, but so our employee had a falling out with her mom. I'll just leave it at that. It's too long of a story. And so then all of a sudden the mom has cancer. Mom gets cancer. And so my I don't want to name names because I didn't clear this telling the story. So I'll say my colleague, my employee. This is a different one now. She stood her ground and said, look, when my sister was going through this shit and my mom was all about my mom, she was all about herself. My mom was just looking out for her. My colleague now went and said, just because you have cancer now, that doesn't erase what you did and where the relationship stands. You don't get a pass to treat me like that. They had I don't know. There was some contention amongst the family at the sister's funeral, and the mom kind of had I don't know, I shouldn't be telling the story. The mom had an all about me kind of a moment, and that rubbed everybody, the guests, because I was at the funeral. It changed the tone of everything. It overshadowed what we now call a celebration of life. So the mom's actions, I would say that if I were to, it wasn't a huge funeral, but if I were to survey, let's say it was 50 people, it was more than that. If I asked the 50 people that were at the funeral, would you have asked the mom to leave after she said and did what she did? I would, I was a communications major in school. I would guess upwards of 95% of the people would have said, yeah, she crossed the line. She should have gone. So now, let's say present day, that the mom has cancer. And so, my colleague is just kind of like, no, you know what? Just because you raised me and you held your legal obligation to clothe me and house me for 18 years or whatever it is. And, we've had relationships since, obviously my entire life. Just because you have cancer now and it's this sad story and feel bad for me and woe is me, it doesn't erase it. It doesn't give you a free pass. That's how I was with my parents. My mom had breast cancer and my dad had prostate cancer. They found out about it, by the way, the same day. And we were in a place where I hadn't spoken to them in a while because of things that they had done to me and my home. So when she texted me that, now I had heard from a cousin of mine that my mom had breast cancer. I didn't know about my dad at the time. But then, days later, my mom texts and says, oh, well, I've got cancer and he's got cancer. And, I didn't reply because the way things ended initially was that you haven't apologized for this major thing that you did that deeply impacted my life. So you might, you could argue and say, well, it's sort of water under the bridge. Okay, well, it's cancer and it could be life, whatever. That maybe that is a pass for some people, but I can't, what had happened to me and then for it to impact me and then it be flipped around and manipulated that I was in the wrong when I was not. Why would I want somebody like that in my life? Why would I want to, be around that? Why would I want to condone that? You can't go and shit on me, stomp me into the ground and essentially say my feelings don't matter, and then in the next breath want me to feel sorry for you and come and run and console you because you suddenly have a health issue. It doesn't work that way. Not for me anyway, and not for my colleague who, sorry to hear that you have cancer, but all right. Maybe you shouldn't have been a fucking bitch at the funeral of your own kid. And again, whether that's right or wrong, that's the decision that, people make. Would I have a tough time going and saying, well, it's your house is a disaster. Your house is a hoard. Your house is a giant mess. I'm not endangering my safety and breathing in whatever the hell garbage is in there. What? No, I don't care how great of a parent you were. That's not my problem. It's not my, I'll get you in touch. I'll give you phone numbers of places that you can call to, help clean it or whatever. But you can't treat me like shit and then in the next breath expect me to come and save the day and dig you out of, literally in that case, literally dig you out of a hoard. That's not how it goes. So I realize, I said at the top of the show, this is kind of one of those sensitive issues, right? Of, they're your parents and, but you have to remember that at the end of the day, you're not legally responsible for taking care of your parents. You feel like you have to because there's that emotional attachment and you don't want to see them suffering. But again, like, as I mentioned, I use the word resourceful. That generation that's now in their 60s, 70s, 80s, they're way more resourceful than people I think are now. Now where our resourcefulness is Googling shit and Googling how to buy a new one. No, they were the ones that were fixing the fucking refrigerator and figuring out how to fix the vacuum if it wasn't working, or they would go and repatch the couch if there was a tear or something like that. You'd get it reupholstered. You would do. Now people are just like, well, I'll just buy a new fucking couch then. No, I that's how we grew up. Oh my God, I can't tell you how many things my dad would, the joke was duct tape is the fix everything. So I don't agree to that where, well, they're not technology savvy. Well, you know what? Then they should still have a landline. If they're not technologically savvy, they get a landline. Those still exist. You can call information numbers in our city in Winnipeg, 311. It's right to the city. Los Angeles too. We've got 311 or 211. What is it in Los Angeles? I can't remember now. But anyway, there's a 1-1 system. Is it 211? I don't even know what it is here. My point is, that's the thing, is they'll make excuses, right? I don't have a phone like that. Well, call 311. Or find out where the senior's home is in the neighborhood. Get a ride there, call there, something. It's up to you. Send me an email. I know a lot of you are going to disagree with me on this one, but send me an email. Live, Live, at jbonair.com. Live at jbonair.com. Let me again repeat. I'm not saying you don't care for your parents. I'm not saying leave them high and dry. I'm not saying go find your own fucking way to chemo. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you still have your life. And while you can assist and you can step in because, one, it's the right thing to do. Two, you have that emotional guilt if you don't. I get it. But it's not your responsibility. I guess unless they stick you with power of attorney, then I guess you are kind of legally stuck. Well, sucks to be you for agreeing to that, I guess. But yeah, I mean, and let me also go and say, like, I'm not a hypocrite. Like, I realize that, you know, in my life, sure, I don't have many close relationships with people, and that's also just by design. But at the same time, I mean, I realize that could be potentially screwing myself over, right? Think about people who go through their whole life being single and, you know, they don't have kids or whatever it is. But, you know, that's something that they're very well aware of that. You know, at some point you're potentially going to get sick, right? You're going to have some kind of an illness as you age. That's just inevitable. That's just the way things go. What's the statistic that how many of us are going to have cancer at some point? I mean, right? Okay. So you look at those things. You take those steps. Obviously, again, like I said, there's situations, dementia. I mean, it comes on, but you know, at some point, yeah, if that's stubbornness, well, okay, I'm sorry, Dad. Then you're on your own. But I have a job. I can't lose my job to do this. I can't drop everything all the time and come and do this when all you do is sit at home and smoke and eat junk food and collect things and make your house a fire hazard. That's a decision that you're making. And then you're going to come at people and argue and be defensive and, you know, come out swinging at people who tell you to live a different life. Well, then, you know what? Enjoy your hoard. Enjoy your hoard. At some point, you have to say, like, I've got more self-respect than being treated like that. That's my dad that's going to be treating me like that. And now he wants my help to basically, you know, be his caregiver now until he's dead. Fuck off. Fuck off. Fuck right off. It's not happening. Maybe, does that make me, Jeremy Brad, like, does that make me a bad person for saying that or having that feeling? No, but at the same time, how dare you tell me to mind my own business about your fucking hoard, and then in the next breath expect me to drop everything and drive you around and do all this stuff, and I'm going to take you shopping so you can go and buy more stuff for your trash pile? Fuck right off. Yeah, I don't know. I think because for me, like I said, I had that strained relationship with my parents, well, my family really in general. I didn't speak with anybody for years. So for me, I had that separation. I had that kind of step back and go, you know, we always hear that family is everything. But you know what? If your family doesn't respect you and doesn't, you know, appreciate you for who you are and what you've done and any of that kind of stuff, well, it's not my loss then for not having them in my life. That was something that was a realization. Like I had to come to that conclusion on my own. The situation with my mom, with my parents, you know, not respecting the boundaries of my house. I mean, you know, that's something where I kind of sit there and go, wow, I can't believe that somebody like that, somebody who's known you their whole life, somebody who cared for you and raised you and again was a teacher for 30 some years, would go and do something like that to me. And then blame me for it, and then manipulate it, and try to do this whole, you know, she's the victim kind of a thing. And I'm sitting here going, huh? And then I've given you months or however long to make it right and to, you know, correct what you did. But you maintain that you didn't do anything wrong, or that, you know, her one of her arguments to me was, you know, you're not a parent, you wouldn't understand. Well, now you've just called me stupid. So when you think that you're fixing the problem, when you think that you're making amends, when you think that you're, you know, making things better with your kid that you've wronged, but that's your response was you're not a parent, you wouldn't understand. Okay, all right. I don't have to be black to understand that racism is painful. I don't have to be gay. That's just a coincidence. I happen to be gay, but I don't need to be gay to understand that homophobia hurts and is painful. There was a fight on The View years ago with Rosie and Whoopi, where Whoopi was basically screaming that Rosie wouldn't understand racism because she's not black, and I kind of agree with Rosie. She's like, I'm smart enough to understand that. I haven't been cheated on, but I know that being cheated on is hurtful. Those are just things that we intellectually know. Now, can I relate to racism is a different question. But that whole thing, you're not a parent, you wouldn't understand, you're calling me stupid. So you might not, again, because you're defending yourself, right? You're not seeing it that way. You're not seeing that you're calling me stupid. I was a communications major. I can understand things. You wouldn't understand, you're not a parent. So again, that's her getting defensive and saying, I'm the mother. I can do anything I want. I'm right. You're wrong. And you wouldn't see it from my position because you don't raise kids, and that's it. You called me stupid. That's, at the end of the day, you just called me stupid. That was your attempt at an apology. So again, you don't see that you did anything wrong. You have no remorse for pissing off your kid, and I don't even have time to get into the story of what she did, but she essentially broke into my house and damaged property because she had a spaz out. She had a freak out for absolutely no reason, and then blamed me for it. Meanwhile, I wasn't even in town. But anyway, that's another story. So again, just going back to the whole parenting thing, and then I would have had this opinion whether I had a solid relationship with my parents or not. But again, I mean, I want to know what you think. Is it your responsibility as the kid all of a sudden to step up and take care of them? Or can they, I don't know what it is. Is it that all of a sudden just the parents now suddenly kind of go, all right, well, take care of me. I mean, like I said, it's sort of a societal expectation that that's what you're going to do. But if they're on their own, then what? Right? They made things work back in the day. They would get through. I mean, think about the illnesses that you would get through. Right? You sometimes you just have to suffer through it too. But I'm not saying a terminal illness. But I'm just saying, whether it was a cold or flu, they didn't have cold medications. They didn't just go to a drugstore and be like, I'd like the bottle of cough syrup. Maybe they would have that if they were out on the farm somewhere. But you know what? They got through the sickness. Or if something broke, they fixed it. Or if something happened, they found a way to do it. So send me an email. Tell me your thoughts. Live, live@jbonr.com. I know we are so late because this segment alone right there was 30 minutes. So we are very over time. I want to thank you so much for listening. If you agree with me or disagree with me, I want to hear from you. But if you're going to come out swinging and tell me that I'm an asshole, at least justify your argument, okay? Because you wouldn't understand what I've gone through on this show. All right, I'll talk to you next time, everybody. Goodbye for now.
We hear you chirping. Get scribbling. Tweet up the Scribble at The Scribble Show. Join the discussion with Jeremy Bradley. It's all going down right now on Twitter @The Scribble Show and @thescribbleshow.com. Want more Scribble? Check out thescribbleshow.com for past shows, celebrity interviews, cheapskate tips, and more. That's at thescribbleshow.com and on Twitter @The Scribble Show. The Scribble is a speak-free media presentation.